Tonight we wander through the quieter side of the city, where the bright lights fade into soft amber glows, and the streets grow calm enough that even your footsteps seem louder than usual. The evening air feels cool against your skin as you move slowly along the sidewalk, past shuttered shops and tired buildings that look like they have been watching people come and go for decades. It's the kind of night where the world feels quieter than normal. Cars pass only occasionally. Somewhere in the distance, a stray dog barks once and then decides the effort is not worth it. And that's when you notice him. He sits near the edge of the pavement beside a small tea stall that closed hours ago. A thin blanket rests around his shoulders, though it doesn't look like it does much to keep the cold away. In front of him lies a small metal bowl with a few scattered coins that catch the dim streetlight. You've passed people like him before. Everyone has. But tonight something is different. Maybe it's the way he sits so still, as if he has been part of the sidewalk longer than the cracked tiles beneath him. Or maybe it's his eyes, quiet, tired eyes that seem to carry more stories than most libraries. You slow down a little. Now, before we go any further, there's something you should know. Walking through stories like this can sometimes feel uncomfortable, because once you start paying attention to the lives of people who sleep under the open sky, you realize something unsettling. Their stories are often bigger than our own. And yes, you probably won't survive this story emotionally, not because anything dramatic will explode or collapse around you, but because sometimes the quiet tragedies are the ones that echo the longest. But don't worry, we're going to move through this slowly tonight, calmly, gently. Just you, the quiet street, and the life of a man most people never stop to notice. And before we go deeper into his story, there's a small favor. If you genuinely enjoy my stories, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. There, that was painless. Now take a slow breath, relax your shoulders, and settle in comfortably wherever you are listening. Because tonight, we are stepping into a life that unfolded in ways no one expected. Let's ease into tonight's journey together. You stand a few steps away from the beggar, pretending for a moment to check your phone. Not because you actually need to. Your phone is probably doing just fine, but because humans have perfected the ancient art of pretending not to stare. Still, curiosity wins. You glance back. The man looks older than he probably is. His beard is uneven and gray in places, and his clothes carry the tired look of fabric that has been worn far longer than it was meant to survive. Yet there is something calm about him. He doesn't call out to passing people like some beggars do. He doesn't stretch his hand toward strangers or plead for attention. He simply sits and waits. A motorcycle hums past, briefly lighting the street with its bright headlamp. For a moment the light falls across his face, and you see the deep lines carved around his eyes. Those are not just wrinkles. Those are years. You drop a coin into the metal bowl. The sound is small but clear. A bright little clink that echoes slightly in the quiet night. He looks up. "Thank you," he says softly. His voice surprises you. It's calm, steady, almost gentle. Not the rough voice you might expect from someone who spends every day on dusty streets breathing traffic smoke and city air. You nod awkwardly. And then, for reasons you can't quite explain, you linger. Maybe it's curiosity. Maybe it's sympathy. Or maybe it's simply because your bus isn't coming for another 20 minutes, and standing beside a tea stall feels slightly less boring than staring at a cracked bus stop bench. The beggar shifts slightly beneath his blanket. "You're waiting for the bus," he says. It's not a question. You glance toward the empty road and nod. "How did you know?" He smiles faintly. "People who are lost walk differently," he says. "People who are waiting stand still." You blink. Well, that's oddly philosophical for someone sitting beside a closed tea stall. For a moment neither of you speaks. The night settles again. From somewhere down the street comes the faint clatter of dishes being washed. a late restaurant finishing its work for the night. You sit on the low curb nearby, not too close, but close enough. The beggar doesn't seem surprised. In fact, he looks almost amused. "You're curious," he says. "Maybe you admit," he chuckles quietly, "you want to know how someone ends up here." You hesitate. Because yes, you do. But asking someone that question feels like walking straight into a stranger's memories with muddy shoes. Still, curiosity wins again. "How long have you been here?" you ask. The beggar looks up at the sky for a moment, as if calculating something that only the stars remember. "A long time," he says. "That's not very specific." He laughs softly. Time becomes strange on the street. He gestures toward the empty road. Days feel long. Years pass quickly. A light breeze drifts through the street, rustling the edges of old posters stuck to a nearby wall. You notice something beside him. A small cloth bag, carefully folded. Inside it are a few simple things: an old notebook, a pen, and what looks like a worn photograph. The notebook catches your attention. "You write?" you ask. He nods. "Sometimes. That's unexpected." Another faint smile crosses his face. "Everyone has stories," he says, "even beggars. Especially beggars." The words hang in the air for a moment, and suddenly you realize something important. This man hasn't always been sitting here. No one begins life on a sidewalk beside a metal bowl. Somewhere behind those quiet eyes is an entire lifetime, a childhood, a home, maybe even laughter. You lean back slightly, listening as the night continues around you. The bus rumbles past in the distance, but doesn't stop here. The beggar watches it go. "People think we appear from nowhere," he says after a while, "but everyone comes from somewhere." He gently picks up the old photograph from his bag. For a moment, he studies it silently. You try not to stare, but curiosity is doing push-ups in your brain. Finally, he turns the photo slightly so you can see. It shows a small family, a woman with kind eyes, a little boy standing proudly in a school uniform, and beside them, a younger version of the man sitting next to you now, cleaner, healthier, smiling. You blink. "Well," you say quietly, "that's unexpected." The beggar nods. "That was a long time ago." He carefully places the photo back in the bag, as if returning a fragile memory to its shelf. The street grows even quieter now. The night deepens. You feel a strange sensation building in your chest, because suddenly this man isn't just a figure on the sidewalk anymore. He's someone with a past, someone who once stood in photographs and celebrated birthdays and probably argued about dinner like every other human being on the planet. And now he sits beside a metal bowl collecting coins from strangers. Life can turn in strange directions, sometimes slowly, sometimes all at once. The beggar looks toward the dark road again. "Do you know something funny?" he says. "What?" "Most people who pass me think I have nothing." He pauses. "But they're wrong." You raise an eyebrow. "Oh?" He taps the small notebook beside him. "I still have my memories." He leans back against the wall, pulling the blanket a little tighter around his shoulders. And sometimes he says quietly, "That's heavier than any bag." The wind moves softly through the empty street, and you begin to realize that the story you've stumbled into tonight might be far bigger than you expected. Because this quiet man beside the tea stall once had a life full of hope, a childhood, a family, dreams that stretched far beyond the cracked pavement beneath your feet. And as the night slowly continues, the first pieces of that life begin to surface, not all at once, but gently, like old memories drifting upward from deep water. The quiet settles around you like a soft blanket, The kind that doesn't warm you immediately but slowly wraps the edges of the night in calm stillness. The street light above flickers once dramatically, like it's auditioning for a low-budget horror movie, but then it stabilizes again, glowing a tired yellow. The beggar shifts slightly beside the wall. You sit nearby, elbows resting on your knees, watching the empty road stretch into darkness. It's strange, you think, how quickly a stranger's life can become interesting once you pause long enough to listen. Most people walk past him every day without even noticing his face, but tonight you're here, and somehow the story is beginning. The man rubs his hands together slowly, warming them in the cool air. "You saw the photo," he says after a moment. You nod. "That was your family." He gives a small smile. "Yes." The smile stays on his face for a second longer than expected, like a candle trying to stay lit in a quiet wind. Then it fades. "You had a home?" You ask gently. The question feels obvious, but sometimes obvious questions are the only door into a story. "Oh yes," he says softly. "A small house. Not fancy, but warm." His eyes drift toward the road again, though it's clear he isn't looking at the street anymore. He's looking somewhere else, somewhere further back in time. "You wake up early," he says quietly, speaking now as if you are stepping into the memory with him. You're standing in a small village lane where morning sunlight spills over low rooftops and birds chatter loudly in the trees. The air smells faintly of cooking rice and wood smoke. You're young again. Small feet on cool floor tiles. Your mother is already awake in the kitchen, moving quietly as she prepares breakfast. A pot clinks gently against the stove. Steam rises into the warm morning light. You hear her humming softly, one of those songs that mothers seem to know without ever remembering where they learned it. Your father sits outside near the doorway, tying his worn shoes before leaving for work. He works long days, hard days, but he always smiles when he sees you. The beggar's voice continues softly beside you in the present, guiding the memory forward. "My father fixed machines," he says. "Old engines, bicycles, anything that came through the village." You imagine the small workshop now, metal tools neatly arranged on wooden shelves, the smell of oil and dust and hot metal filling the air. Little you stands nearby, watching carefully, fascinated by how broken things slowly return to life in your father's hands. "Sometimes he let me help," the beggar says with a faint chuckle. "Mostly I just handed him the wrong tools." You smile. That sounds about right for a kid. The memory continues. You walk to school along a dirt road with a small group of other children. The sun climbs slowly over the fields, warming the earth as the morning grows brighter. Life is simple, predictable, safe. And if you've ever had a childhood even remotely like this, you know something important about it. You never realize how good it is while you're living it. You just assume it will last forever. The beggar exhales slowly. "I wanted to be a teacher," he says. "That surprises you?" "Really?" He nods. "Yes." In the memory, you now sit in a small classroom with wooden desks and a chalkboard covered in uneven handwriting. The teacher stands at the front explaining a lesson while dust from the chalk floats lazily through the sunlight coming from the window. You're paying attention, listening carefully, because for some reason learning feels exciting to you. The idea that knowledge could open doors beyond the village fills your young mind with possibility. Your mother believed in that dream too. She always said education was a bridge, the beggar says quietly. A bridge to a better life. You can almost see her again now in the small house kitchen, smiling proudly when you return from school with good marks. She pats your head. Your father laughs loudly and lifts you into the air like you weigh nothing. Simple moments, ordinary moments, but they build the foundation of a life. And then the years begin to move, just like they always do. You grow taller. Your voice deepens. Your school books become more difficult. Your father's workshop grows busier. The village slowly changes too. New roads, new buildings, new people arriving. Life expands outward like ripples in a pond. Eventually you leave the village to attend college in the city. The beggar glances at you. That was the first time I saw buildings taller than trees, he says. You laugh softly. Overwhelming. Very. You imagine that moment now. Young you stepping off a crowded bus into the roaring chaos of city life. Cars honking, vendors shouting, people moving in every direction like a human river. Compared to the quiet rhythm of village life, it must have felt like stepping into another world entirely. But you adjust. People always do. You study hard, you make friends, you discover cheap street food that somehow tastes better than expensive restaurant meals. And if we're being honest, street food usually wins that contest anyway. Eventually, you graduate. Your dream of becoming a teacher begins to take shape. You find a small teaching job in the city. Nothing glamorous, just a modest classroom with chook desks and noisy students who would rather talk about football than mathematics, but you love it, because teaching means something to you. Every day you walk into that classroom hoping you might help someone else build their own bridge to a better life. The beggar smiles faintly as he describes it. Children are funny, he says. They ask questions adults forget to ask. You nod. That's true. Kids will question absolutely everything, including whether gravity is optional and whether homework is secretly illegal. And somewhere during those early teaching years, something wonderful happens. You meet someone. Her name is Amina. You see her one afternoon at a small bookstore near the school. She stands by the window reading quietly, sunlight falling across the pages of the book in her hands. You hesitate before speaking to her hands, because starting conversations with strangers can feel terrifying, but eventually, courage wins. Barely. You ask her what she's reading. She tells you. You pretend you've read it too. Spoiler alert, you absolutely have not, but she smiles anyway. And just like that, a new chapter begins. The beggar's eyes soften as he remembers. We talked for hours that day, he says. About books, about dreams, about everything. Days turn into weeks, weeks turn into years. Eventually you marry. The small ceremony is simple but joyful. Friends and family gather under strings of lights while laughter fills the warm evening air. Life feels full, complete. Together you build a home, not a large home, but a happy one. And soon a new little voice fills the rooms. Your son. The beggar's hand trembles slightly as he mentions him. He had the loudest laugh, he says softly. You imagine the child now running through the small house chasing imaginary adventures while his parents watch with quiet happiness. Evenings are spent together eating simple meals and sharing stories from the day. Sometimes you help your son with his homework. Sometimes you all sit outside watching the stars. And in those moments, the future feels wide open, bright, secure. But life, as you already know, has a way of changing directions when no one expects it. The beggar grows quiet again. His eyes return slowly from the past to the empty street before you. The silence stretches between you. You sense the shift in the story now. Something darker approaching, the kind of moment that quietly divides a life into two parts, before and after. He takes a slow breath. Everything was good, he says. And when someone begins a sentence like that, you already know the next part of the story won't be easy. The night grows deeper around you. The soft glow of the streetlight above now feels warmer than before. Like a quiet lantern holding the darkness at a respectful distance. A gentle breeze slides through the street again, carrying the faint smell of distant rain and roadside dust. The beggar sits very still. For a moment it seems as if he might not continue the story, Sometimes memories behave like that. They come easily until suddenly they reach a place that feels heavier than the rest. You wait quietly. After all, rushing someone through their past is a bit like rushing someone through a sunset. It doesn't work, and it usually ruins the view. Finally, he exhales slowly. Life was good, he repeats. His eyes remain on the empty road ahead. You wake up each day thinking tomorrow will look exactly like today. You nod slightly. That's a comfortable illusion most people carry around. And most of the time, it works perfectly. Until it doesn't. He pulls the blanket around his shoulders and continues. You're standing in the classroom, he says softly, and suddenly the memory unfolds again. You are back inside the school. The afternoon sun leans through tall windows, painting long stripes of light across the classroom floor. The air smells faintly of chalk dust and warm paper. Your students are restless today. One boy taps his pencil against the desk like he's auditioning to become the world's least successful drummer. Another whispers jokes to his friend in the back row. You pretend not to notice. Because teachers have mastered the delicate art of hearing absolutely everything while pretending to hear absolutely nothing, you finish the lesson, the bell rings, students burst out of the room like a flock of birds escaping a cage, and soon the classroom becomes quiet again. You pack your books into a small worn bag and step outside into the late afternoon sunlight. The city hums around you. Buses roar down the street. Street vendors shout cheerful greetings. Life moves quickly, but it feels normal, comfortable, predictable. You walk home through the familiar streets. As you turn the corner toward your house, you hear your son's laughter spilling through the open window. That loud laugh, the one the beggar mentioned earlier. Inside the small home, Amina stands in the kitchen preparing dinner, while your son sits at the table drawing something with intense concentration. You peek over his shoulder. Is that supposed to be me? You ask. He nods proudly. The drawing looks creative. Your head appears slightly square. Your arms are suspiciously long. And for some reason you seem to have 3 eyebrows, but you praise it anyway. Because parenting requires the ability to admire artwork that sometimes resembles a confused potato with limbs. The beggar chuckles softly beside you as he remembers. He always drew me taller than I was. That evening passes like many others. Dinner, homework, stories before bed. Your son falls asleep halfway through the story, still clutching the blanket beneath his chin. You quietly close the bedroom door. In the living room, Amina sits beside you. The two of you talk softly about ordinary things. Work, bills, plans for the future. At some point, she leans her head on your shoulder. Outside, the city continues moving, but inside the small house, everything feels peaceful, safe, complete. The beggar pauses again. His voice lowers slightly. And then he says quietly, one morning arrives that changes everything. You feel a chill drift through the story. It's subtle, but unmistakable. The memory shifts again. You wake up early that morning, just as the sun begins to rise. The light creeping through the curtains paints soft patterns across the bedroom wall. Amina is already awake. She's sitting on the edge of the bed holding her stomach. Are you okay? You ask. She nods slowly. Just tired, she says. You believe her. Because tiredness is normal. People are tired all the time. Especially adults. Especially parents. Especially people who try to balance work, family, and life without spilling everything like a plate of noodles on a bumpy road. She smiles. Go to work, she tells you. I'll rest today, so you leave. And this moment, this ordinary moment, becomes one of the memories that stays with you forever. Because it's the last normal morning you'll have for a long time. The day moves forward. You teach your classes. You grade papers. You argue politely with the school printer that absolutely refuses to cooperate because printers are secretly agents of chaos. By afternoon, dark clouds begin gathering in the sky. A storm is coming. Rain starts falling as you leave the school. Heavy drops splash against the pavement while thunder rolls quietly in the distance. You hurry home. But when you reach the house, something feels wrong immediately. The front door is open. Inside, the room is silent. Too silent. You step inside. Amina? You call. No answer. Your son sits on the couch, frightened. His small hands grip the edge of a blanket. Where's Mama? You ask. His voice trembles. She fell. Your heart drops. You rush into the kitchen. Amina lies on the floor. Unconscious. The world suddenly moves faster than your thoughts. You grab your phone. Call for help. Minutes stretch like hours. Rain pounds the roof while the ambulance siren grows louder outside. Your son cries quietly in the living room. You kneel beside her, whispering her name again and again. Eventually, the ambulance arrives. Paramedics rush inside. Bright lights flash. Voices speak quickly. You follow them through the rain as they lift her onto the stretcher. The ride to the hospital feels endless. Your son sits beside you, holding your arm tightly. The beggar's voice grows softer now. The doctors worked quickly, he says. But sometimes, even the fastest help arrives too late. Hours pass in the hospital waiting room. White walls, bright lights, the quiet hum of machines. Finally, a doctor approaches. You stand. Your heart already knows what the words will be before they are spoken. Amina had a sudden internal illness the doctors didn't know about. A rare condition, something that had been hidden silently for months. They tried everything, but she didn't survive. The memory falls silent. Back in the present, the beggar sits beside you again under the dim street light. The city is quiet. The metal bowl rests untouched beside him. You feel the weight of the story settle heavily in the night air. He stares at the pavement. For a long time, he says slowly, I believed the world had simply made a mistake. His voice is calm, but the calm carries deep sadness beneath it. Like someone had mixed up the names. He pauses, as if the wrong person had been taken. You don't speak. There isn't anything useful to say in moments like that. The wind moves gently through the empty street. The beggar rubs his hands together again. That was the day everything began to fall apart. And even though the story is already heavy, you sense that the hardest parts are still waiting ahead. The night air feels cooler now. Not dramatically colder, just enough that you notice yourself pulling your arms a little closer to your body. The streetlight above continues its quiet duty, illuminating the pavement like a tired guardian of late-night thoughts. Beside you, the beggar remains still. For a while, neither of you speaks. Some stories create silence afterward, and this is one of them. Cars pass occasionally at the far end of the street, their headlights briefly sliding across the road like wandering moons. Somewhere down the block, a cat leaps onto a trash bin and knocks something over, then quickly pretends nothing happened, which, if you've ever met a cat, is extremely on-brand behavior. Finally, the beggar exhales slowly. The house became very quiet after that, he says. You nod gently. You can almost feel it. The small home that once held laughter, warm meals, and bedtime stories now feels different. He continues the memory. You stand in the doorway of the house days after the funeral. Friends and neighbors have slowly returned to their lives. The last comforting words have been spoken. The last plates of food brought by kind neighbors sit half-finished on the kitchen table. Now it's just you and your son. Silence fills the rooms like fog. Your son doesn't laugh as loudly anymore. Children understand more than adults realize. They might not know the medical terms or the complicated reasons life changes suddenly, but they know when someone they love is gone. At night, he asks questions. Is Mama coming back? You pause every time, because answering that question feels like trying to explain gravity to someone who has never seen the sky. No, you say softly. He doesn't cry loudly. Instead, he just nods slowly, like a tiny person trying to accept something far bigger than his small heart should have to hold. The beggar rubs his hands slowly together. I tried to stay strong, he says. You believe him, because most parents try. Even when they feel like the ground beneath their life has disappeared, the days move forward. You continue teaching at school. You help your son with homework. You cook simple meals. You wash dishes. You fix the broken faucet in the kitchen because apparently faucets choose the worst emotional timing to start leaking. Life becomes routine again, but it's a different routine now, heavier, quieter. One evening, your son sits beside you at the table drawing again. He slides the paper toward you proudly. This time the drawing shows 3 people, you, your son, and Amina, but above her head he has drawn a small cloud. You stare at it for a moment. Why is Mama in the cloud? You ask gently. He shrugs. Teacher said people go to heaven. He taps the cloud, so she lives there now. You smile softly. Children build their own explanations for things adults struggle to understand, and sometimes their explanations are strangely comforting. The beggar's voice grows distant again as the memory continues. Months pass. You slowly adjust to the new rhythm of life, but grief has a quiet way of staying present, not always loudly, not always painfully. Sometimes it simply sits beside you, like a shadow that follows everywhere. Then something else begins to change. At first it's small. Your son gets sick. Just a fever. Nothing unusual. Children get fevers all the time. The doctor prescribes medicine. He rests at home for a few days, but the fever doesn't leave. Instead, it grows worse. You bring him back to the hospital. Tests begin. Doctors speak in careful voices. Medical words appear that you've never heard before. Words that feel heavy even before you fully understand them. The beggar's hands tighten slightly around the blanket. They found something in his blood, he says quietly. You feel your chest tighten as the story moves forward. The hospital room smells like disinfectant and quiet worry. Machines hum softly. Your son lies in the small bed, looking smaller than usual. Doctors explain the diagnosis, a serious illness, one that will require long treatment, expensive treatment, the kind of treatment that forces families into choices they never imagined making. The beggar looks toward the empty road again. Hope is a strange thing, he says. It refuses to disappear, even when life becomes very difficult. So you hope. Of course you do. You begin the treatments. Hospital visits become part of daily life. You spend long hours sitting beside the bed while nurses move quietly through the hallway. Your son tries to stay brave. Sometimes he even jokes with the doctors. One day he asks if the hospital food is secretly punishment for something he did. The nurse laughs. You laugh too, because humor is one of the few defenses humans have against fear. But the treatments cost money. More money than a teacher earns. First you use your savings, then you borrow from friends, then you sell small things from the house, the television, the extra furniture, anything that might help buy a little more time. Weeks pass, then months. The illness refuses to leave. Your son grows weaker, yet he still smiles whenever you enter the room, still asks about school, still draws pictures. The beggar's voice becomes softer now. One night he asked me something, he says. You wait quietly. He asked if I was tired. You can imagine the moment clearly. The hospital room dimly lit, the quiet beep of a monitor in the background. Your son looking at you with gentle concern. Even though he's the one lying in the hospital bed, you smile and shake your head. No, you tell him, I'm not tired, but children have a remarkable ability to see the truth hiding behind adult faces. He studies you carefully, then he says something simple. You should sleep sometimes. The beggar closes his eyes briefly. I told him I would, but of course you don't sleep much, because every minute feels too important to miss. Every small improvement becomes a victory. Every setback becomes another storm to face. Eventually, the savings disappear completely. Debt begins to grow. Bills pile up. But you keep fighting. Because parents don't stop fighting for their children, even when the battle feels impossible. The wind moves gently down the empty street again. Back in the present, the beggar sits quietly beside you. His eyes reflect the faint street light. For a while, he says slowly, I believe love would be enough to win. He looks down at the pavement, but sometimes life writes endings we cannot change. The silence stretches again, and you begin to sense the next part of the story approaching, the moment when hope begins to fade, the moment when everything that once felt stable starts to collapse, and you realize that the path toward this quiet sidewalk has already begun. The wind slips quietly through the street again, brushing along the pavement and carrying the distant sound of a late bus somewhere far away in the city. The kind of sound that reminds you the world is still moving, even while you sit here listening to a story that feels frozen in time. The beggar adjusts the blanket around his shoulders. For a moment he says nothing. You can almost sense that the next part of the memory is heavier than the rest. Sometimes life doesn't collapse all at once. Sometimes it slowly removes the pieces one by one, and before you realize what's happening, the entire structure is gone. He clears his throat softly. The treatment's continued, he says. You step back into the memory again. The hospital becomes familiar. Too familiar. The hallways, the smell of antiseptic, the quiet footsteps of nurses walking past in soft shoes. You learn the rhythm of the place, morning tests, afternoon doctor visits, evening medication, nighttime waiting. Your son grows used to the hospital bed. His drawings now decorate the wall beside him like small windows into a happier world. One drawing shows a large house with a garden. Another shows the three of you standing under a bright yellow sun, and one shows you as a superhero wearing a cape. The beggar chuckles softly beside you. He gave me a very large cape, he says. Apparently I could also fly. You smile. Well, that's convenient. Yes, he replies. I wish it had been true. The memory continues. Doctors speak carefully now, more serious. The treatments are not working the way they hoped. They suggest additional options, more tests, different medicines, all of them more expensive, all of them uncertain. You sit across from the doctor in a quiet office. A folder of papers rests on the desk between you. The doctor explains the costs. The numbers feel unreal. They stretch far beyond anything you could possibly afford. You nod slowly, pretending to understand how you will manage it, because saying, I don't know how to save my child out loud feels like admitting defeat, and parents rarely allow themselves to say those words. The beggar's hands rest quietly in his lap. I sold the house, he says. You feel the weight of that moment, the small home where laughter once filled the rooms, the kitchen where Amina cooked warm meals, the bedroom where your son slept peacefully before life changed, all of it gone. The sale gives you more money for treatment, but it also means you and your son move into a tiny rented room closer to the hospital. The room is small, just enough space for 2 beds and a narrow table, but it doesn't matter because the hospital becomes the center of your world anyway. Weeks pass, then months. The illness continues its slow battle. Your son grows weaker. but he still smiles whenever you enter the room. One afternoon he hands you a folded piece of paper. "What's this?" you ask. "A letter," he says proudly. You open it. The handwriting is messy and uneven, but the words are clear. "Dear Baba, when I get better we should go see the ocean. Teacher says it is very big, bigger than the school. I want to see if that's true. Love, your son." The beggar pauses. For a long moment he says nothing. The quiet street around you seems to hold its breath. He had never seen the ocean, the beggar says softly. You imagine that small letter again, the simple hope inside it, a child's dream of something as ordinary and beautiful as standing beside the sea. You fold the letter carefully and place it in your pocket. "Of course we will go," you tell him, "right after you get better." He smiles, satisfied, because children believe promises very easily, and sometimes adults make promises they desperately hope will come true, but the illness continues. One night the doctors call you into another quiet office. You already know the look on their faces. They explain that the treatments are no longer helping. The illness has spread too far. They will continue making your son comfortable, but the chances of recovery are very small. Doctors often choose gentle words, but the meaning behind them still lands like thunder. The beggar looks down at the ground. "I stayed beside him every day," he says. You can see it clearly. The hospital room dim in the evening light. Your son sleeping peacefully while machines monitor his fragile heartbeat. You sit in the chair beside the bed holding his small hand. Sometimes he wakes and talks quietly. Sometimes he simply sleeps. One night he looks at you and asks a question. "Baba, are you sad?" You shake your head quickly. "No." But he studies your face carefully. Children always do. Then he says something unexpected. "It's okay if you are." The beggar smiles faintly. He was always very brave. Days later, the moment arrives that every parent fears. Your son grows weaker. The doctors and nurses move quietly around the room. You hold his hand. His breathing slows, and eventually it stops. The world becomes silent. Not the peaceful kind of silence. The kind that feels empty. The beggar closes his eyes briefly. "When a parent loses a child," he says slowly, "something inside them breaks." You sit quietly beside him. The metal bowl still rests on the pavement, with a few coins reflecting the street light. Cars pass occasionally in the distance, but the moment feels suspended outside time. "I buried him beside his mother," the beggar continues. The small cemetery stands on the edge of the city. 2 simple graves, 2 quiet markers. A family that once shared a small warm house now rests beneath open sky. After that, life becomes harder to navigate. Without the hospital bills, you might think things would improve, but grief has a way of draining the strength from ordinary days. You return to teaching for a while, but concentration becomes difficult. Standing in front of a classroom full of children reminds you too much of what you lost. Eventually, the school replaces you. It's not cruelty, just reality. Bills remain, work disappears, the rented room becomes impossible to afford. You move to cheaper places, then cheaper ones again. Eventually, there is nowhere left to go. The beggar's voice becomes very quiet, and that is how the street slowly appears beneath your feet. You imagine the moment, standing on a crowded sidewalk with a small bag containing the last pieces of your life, a notebook, a photograph, a few clothes, everything else gone. The first night sleeping outside feels impossible, cold, unfamiliar, but humans adapt to almost anything, even the pavement. Back in the present, the beggar glances at the metal bowl beside him. For a long time, he says, "I believed I had lost everything." He pauses, then he taps the small notebook inside his bag. But the stories remained. The wind moves gently through the quiet street again. and you begin to understand that the man sitting beside this closed tea stall is carrying something far heavier than the small cloth bag beside him. He's carrying an entire life, and somehow, despite losing nearly everything, he is still here, still breathing, still telling the story. The street grows even quieter now, the kind of quiet that usually appears sometime after midnight, when the city finally pauses to breathe. Most windows are dark. Shops have long since closed. Even the stray dogs have curled up somewhere warm and decided that barking at invisible enemies can wait until tomorrow. You sit beside the beggar under the streetlight. The small metal bowl beside him holds the same few coins. Nothing has changed around you, and yet, somehow, everything feels different now that you know the story behind the man sitting there. He rubs his hands together slowly. The first night on the street is the hardest, he says. You imagine it immediately. Standing alone beneath the open sky with nothing but a small bag and the quiet realization that the life you once had is gone. No door to close, no bed waiting inside, just pavement, cold pavement. Humans are not designed for that kind of moment. But humans are strangely resilient creatures. The memory continues. You find a place beneath a small overhang outside a closed shop. It isn't comfortable, but at least it protects you from the wind. You sit there with your bag beside you. Cars pass occasionally. People walk by, though fewer than usual at that late hour. Some glance at you briefly, most don't. And in that moment something strange happens. You realize you've become invisible. Not literally invisible, of course. That would actually be a very useful superpower. But socially invisible. People see the shape of a man sitting on the sidewalk, and immediately their minds look somewhere else. It's a quiet survival instinct people develop in cities. If they noticed every painful story around them, their hearts would break 100 times a day. So they learn to look away. The beggar smiles faintly. At first it hurts, he says. Later, you understand. The days begin to blur together. Morning sunlight wakes you early. You walk the streets looking for small jobs. Sometimes you find one. Carrying boxes, sweeping shop floors, helping vendors unload supplies. Small work, small money, but enough to buy food for the day. Some days there is no work. On those days, you sit quietly beside the road. Eventually, someone drops a coin into your hand, then another, and slowly you become something you never imagined becoming, a beggar. The word itself feels heavy, but survival often requires accepting names we once thought impossible. The beggar glances toward the tea stall behind him. This is where I started sitting, he says. You look around the street again, the same place where you found him tonight. Years have passed here. People have come and gone, but the sidewalk remembers everything. At first, sitting here feels unbearable. Every passing person reminds you of the life you once had. Families walking together, children laughing, couples arguing softly about ordinary things like groceries or directions. All the small pieces of life that once belonged to you. But time continues moving, and slowly something changes. You begin to notice other people on the street, not just passers-by, but others like you, the quiet community that lives between buildings and sidewalks. An old man who sleeps near the bus station. A woman who sells flowers during the day and rests on cardboard at night. A boy who collects empty bottles for recycling. People most of the city barely sees, but people with stories. One afternoon you share food with the old man from the bus station. Another day the flower seller gives you tea when the weather turns cold. Small kindnesses appear in unexpected places. The beggar chuckles softly. Funny thing, he says. People with the least often share the most. You nod slowly. It makes sense in a quiet way. When someone knows what it feels like to have nothing, they understand the value of even the smallest gesture. The notebook in his bag appears again. One evening, sitting under the same streetlight where you sit now, you open it. You begin writing. not because anyone asked you to, not because you plan to publish anything, simply because the memories inside you feel too heavy to carry alone. So you write them down: your childhood, your parents, the village, the classroom, Amina, your son. Every memory becomes a small paragraph on the page. The beggar taps the bag beside him. I filled many notebooks, he says. You raise an eyebrow. Really? Yes. What happened to them? He smiles faintly. Sometimes people take them. You blink. They steal your notebooks? He laughs softly. No. Then what? Some people read them. The idea surprises you. One afternoon, a university student stops near the tea stall and notices the notebook in your hands. He asks what you're writing. You hesitate at first, but eventually you show him a page. He reads quietly for several minutes. Then he looks up with wide eyes. You wrote this? He asks. You nod. He smiles warmly. It's beautiful. The compliment feels strange. After all, you're just writing your life, but sometimes the simplest stories carry the deepest emotions. The student returns a few days later. He brings tea and another notebook. You should keep writing, he says. The beggar shrugs gently. I suppose I did. Years pass. Your beard grows gray. Your clothes grow older. But the notebooks continue filling with words, stories of the street, stories of people most of the world ignores. Occasionally someone sits beside you, just like you did tonight, and sometimes they listen. The beggar looks toward you again. People think beggars only ask for money, he says, but sometimes they just want someone to hear their story. The streetlight flickers again, casting soft shadows across the pavement. You realize something quietly remarkable. The man sitting beside you has lost almost everything life once gave him: his home, his family, his work. Yet he still sits here speaking gently, calmly, without bitterness. That kind of strength is rare. The wind drifts softly down the street. The beggar adjusts the blanket once more. For many years I believed my life was finished, he says. He pauses. But stories have a strange way of continuing. You sit quietly beside him, because even though the night is almost over, there is still one final part of his story waiting to be told. The night has become very still now, the kind of stillness that arrives just before dawn begins thinking about appearing. The street lights hum softly above the empty road, and the sky far in the distance has begun to lose a little of its deep darkness. You sit beside the beggar, feeling the quiet weight of everything he has shared. His small cloth bag rests beside him. The notebook inside it contains pieces of a life that once stretched far beyond this sidewalk. He folds his hands together slowly. For a long time, he says, I believed the story ended here. You glance around the quiet street again, the cracked pavement, the closed tea stall, the metal bowl with a few scattered coins. From the outside, it certainly looks like the kind of place where stories stop. But life rarely follows the neat endings we imagine. The beggar continues softly. You wake up one morning and realize something strange. You imagine it again. Another early sunrise, another day beginning on the sidewalk, but something inside you feels different. Not better exactly, but calmer. Grief still lives in your heart. It probably always will. But the sharp edges of it have softened with time. You sit beneath the same street light, watching people begin their morning routines. Workers rushing to buses, shop owners opening metal shutters, students walking to school with backpacks bouncing against their shoulders. Life continues, and slowly you begin to understand something. The world did not stop when your life broke apart. It kept moving. At first, that realization feels cruel, but later, it becomes comforting. Because if the world keeps moving, then maybe your story is still moving too. The beggar glances at the sky where the first hint of pale gray light now touches the horizon. One morning, a little girl stopped here, he says. You picture the scene. A small child walking beside her mother toward school. She notices the man sitting quietly on the sidewalk. Children are naturally curious. They see things adults have trained themselves not to notice. She tugs her mother's sleeve. Why is that man sitting there? She asks. Her mother hesitates. Adults often struggle to answer that question. But before she can speak, the girl walks over to you. She studies you carefully. Then she drops a small coin into the metal bowl. The coin makes the familiar little clink, but instead of walking away immediately, she tilts her head. Are you okay? She asks. The beggar smiles faintly as he remembers. It was the first time someone had asked me that in years. You imagine the moment clearly. The simple kindness in the child's voice, the innocent concern. You nod slowly. Yes, you tell her. I'm okay. She seems satisfied with that answer. Then she does something unexpected. She sits beside you, just for a moment. Her mother stands nearby, slightly nervous but allowing it. The little girl points at the notebook in your hands. What are you writing? A story, you say. Is it a happy story? She asks. You think about that for a moment, and then you answer honestly. It's a sad story, but it has some happy parts too. She nods thoughtfully. That's like my teacher's stories. Then she stands up. Before leaving, she says something very simple. You shouldn't sit here forever. Children have a remarkable ability to say things adults would never dare to say out loud. But the strange thing is, she's right. You shouldn't sit here forever. That day something shifts inside you, not dramatically. Not like lightning striking or music swelling in the background. Just a quiet thought forming slowly. Maybe the story is not finished yet. The beggar looks down at his hands. I started helping people more after that, he says. You raise an eyebrow. Helping people? Yes. It begins with small things. You help an elderly man carry groceries across the street. You guide a lost tourist toward the correct bus stop. You share food with another homeless man who hasn't eaten all day. Tiny actions, small kindnesses, but they begin to change the way people see you. Shop owners start greeting you in the morning. The tea stall owner leaves a cup of tea for you occasionally. The university student returns now and then to read your writing. Slowly, you become something different. Still a beggar, still living on the street, but also a storyteller, a quiet listener, someone who reminds people that every life has meaning, even when it doesn't look impressive from the outside. The beggar glances toward you again. Do you know something interesting? He asks. What? Most people who gave me coins were not the richest ones. You nod. I believe that. He smiles softly. Kindness is not measured in money. The sky grows slightly brighter now. Dawn is slowly approaching. Birds begin chirping somewhere far away. The night is gently stepping aside for morning. The beggar reaches into his bag and pulls out the old photograph again. You see the same smiling family. A younger man, a kind woman, a small boy with bright eyes. He studies the photo quietly. For many years, he says, I believed I had nothing left. His finger rests lightly on the photograph. But I was wrong. He taps his chest gently. I still had love. He taps the notebook. And stories. He looks toward the road where the first early bus rumbles past. And time. The soft morning light begins touching the edges of buildings now. The city is waking up again. You realize something quietly powerful. This man's life did not end when everything fell apart. It simply became a different kind of story, a story most people never stopped long enough to hear. The beggar places the photograph back into his bag. He leans against the wall and closes his eyes for a moment. His voice becomes softer now, slower, like the gentle rhythm of someone preparing to sleep. You sit beside the quiet street, he says. The world moves slowly around you. The morning air feels cool and calm. Cars pass gently. Birds glide through the pale sky. You realize that every person walking past you carries their own invisible story. Some are happy, some are heavy. Most are somewhere in between. You breathe slowly, he continues, and you understand something simple. No one truly has nothing, not while memories remain, not while kindness still exists, not while stories can still be told. The city wakes softly around you now. The street light above flickers one last time before turning off. Morning has arrived. The beggar's voice fades gently, like the last ripple on calm water. And maybe, someday, someone will stop and listen to your story too. The quiet moment stretches peacefully. The street grows brighter. The world continues turning. And somewhere within the calm rhythm of the morning, you let the story settle softly in your mind.